Hey friends, I'm Marcus here with the IndieMusicLab.com. So what I'm going to do today is show you how to take a vocal mix that sounds like this.
I'm on the run with you, my sweet love, there's nothing wrong.
And I'm going to show you how to turn it into this.
I'm on the run with you, my sweet love, there's nothing wrong. Contemplating God under the chemtrails.
So no long intro needed. Today you're going to learn the 6 steps to achieving that intimate, cool Lana Del Rey vocal sound. So follow along in any DAW, does not matter if it's Ableton, Logic, Studio One, blah, blah, blah. I'm using Studio One, but again, it does not matter. I'll say that for the millionth time here. Follow along with what you got and let's dive in. So step 1 to get this Lana Del Rey vocal mix is we need to make sure that we have a good arrangement first, and that is where I'm going to start this video. We need to talk about where the arrangement is. And so as you can see here, visually you can kind of get a glimpse of what we have going here. So these are the vocal tracks from here down to here. These are all our vocal tracks. Now for the first chorus, the first part of this remake that I did, I've got the lead vocal, of course, then I've got a double and a plus 12, which just means an octave up. So we have the lead vocal here doing this. Let me actually mute all of these vocal tracks, and then I'll unmute them as I go. So this is with just the lead vocal.
Contemplating God under the chemtrails over
And then when I add this one,
wearing our shoes in the swimming pool, me and my sister just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
as you can hear, it thickens it up a bit, right? Just adds a nice, cool added layer to it. And that's just a doubled recording. I'm not duplicating the same audio or anything like that. That's just gonna turn up the volume. You can do that sometimes if you then add very specific effects to the duplicated track. But if you're trying to get started with this stuff, don't even do that. Just record in an actual double take, a new take of the track, and then layer it in with your original lead vocal. And then the third track here in this mix is just an octave up. So
with you, my sweet Lord, there's nothing wrong. Contemplating
just going, the falsetto octave up top.
Over the country club, wearing our shoes in the swimming pool.
So that's it. That is what the first part, this first chorus is. And then in the verse, everything simplifies and it goes to just the lead vocal.
Take out your turquoise and all of your jewels.
Right? And then that stays that way all the way until we get back to the chorus. And then this chorus here, you can feel it when you listen to it. You can feel the energy kind of swell and elevate. And a big reason why is because of the added vocal layers that come in. So I'm going to start it here and then you'll get to hear what's happening.
Not unhinged or unhappy, I'm just one. I'm on the run with you, my sweet love, there's nothing wrong. Contemplating God under the chemtrails over the...
So we have the lead vocal and then we have this other double as before, just on top. That's exactly what we did in the first chorus. And then we've got 2 new doubles. We've got this one panned left. It's like 50 left, I think.
Wearing our jewels in the swimming
like 45 left.
Me and my sister just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
Another take on the right side, about 50 to the right. And then we've got the plus 12 octave up, which is also what we did in the first chorus. So that stays the same. And then one more thing I did here for this part is I added in, you could think of these as the accented octave up or the accented plus 12s. So just 2 more takes of that high falsetto part, but just on very specific parts. So
country club.
Right, and so I'm just kind of accenting that, and I sung it 2 more times, and I just wanted to make that part feel louder when it comes to that high part. So let me start here, and you can kind of hear that energy. Listen to the high falsetto part from here.
Chemtrails over the country club, wearing our want you.
When it goes to the country club, you can hear more of that falsetto part pop through, and that is why I added those there. So there you go. That is sort of the arrangement that happened here. Now, of course, this isn't the entirety of the song mapped out. I just remade the first chorus through verse 1 and then through chorus 2 here of this Lana Del Rey Chemtrails. Is it Chemtrails Over the Country Club? I think is the name of it. And of course, if I were to do the whole song, there would be even more variations. But if you can just do something like this to get your song started, the rest of it is actually pretty easy because then it's just a matter of taste, really. But the key is we are adding dynamics. The verse is just one lead vocal. The chorus 1 does have a couple doubles added, but then chorus 2 is we are just elevating it, taking it to that next level. Okay, so that was a rundown of the arrangement. Let's move on to step 2. Now, step 2 to get this Lana Del Rey type vocal mix is you want to process the individual vocal tracks. And what I mean by this is, of course, we've got the lead vocal, and then we've got these doubles and these background tracks for the vocals here as well. And as I'm going to show you in a second, I like to group them, and I recommend that you do this as well. You have a group or a bus for your background vocals and a group or a bus for your lead vocals as well. And often that ends up just being one track, but I still like to run that through a bus, but we'll get into that. But before we do that, what you want to do is go to all of the individual tracks, and you want to do a couple things. Number 1, you need to add some tuning if necessary. Right? And that's what I did for a few of these tracks. So I did add Melodyne to some of these clips as well, which you can't see in the plugin chain, but I just, went in, made some adjustments. I also just straight up added the waves tune to the lead vocal as well as the octave up vocal. So this one here is the lead vocal as well. It just is on a different track, but it's the same thing. And the double, where is the plus 12? Over here. So the plus 12, I just wanted to make sure that high falsetto part was in tune, and so I put some auto tune on the individual track there, but I didn't really tune the rest of the tracks. The rest of the doubles, you don't really need those tuned. Sometimes you can get away with it. Sometimes it can sound cool. But when you're talking about groups of doubles and groups of background tracks, it can start to sound very weird if you put auto-tune on them. And because often you don't need it for the background tracks, the value that those background tracks add is often in their slight pitchiness, especially relative to each other. And so that's just one thing to play around with, to just make sure that your ear is in tune, that you pay close attention to what makes your mix sound better versus not. And in this case, I didn't feel the need to add any tuning to these extra doubles, especially when we get to chorus 2. Okay, so that's the first thing that you want to process or at least look at on the individual tracks, okay? Another thing that you want to add that I always do is add a bit of compression on every single one of your vocal tracks. And the reason for doing this is very, very simple. You are simply trying to balance the volume of that track to shoot down some of those loud parts and those peaks in each one of the vocals. That way, there's more of a consistent volume before you then go into anything else. So to give you an example of how I use compression on my lead vocal, I grabbed my fat channel here in Studio One, which is just like a rack of EQs and compressors, and I went with this 1176 style compressor here.
Over the country club.
And it's not doing anything crazy, as you can see by this needle here.
Your turquoise and all of your jewels.
It's just slightly kissing it for whenever those louder peaks pop through and just adding a bit of balance. And then I do that for every single vocal track. So like on the doubles, I just went with the stock compressor here. As you can see, just a very simple compressor. And often it'll be like a fast attack, fast release, and then adjust the threshold until it compresses those peaks. Let me see where we're at here.
With you, my sweet love, there's nothing wrong. Contemplating God under the chemtrails.
Right, so that's what's happening on the double. It's compressing it a bit more than the lead vocal, but that's just because it's a double and I wanted the volume to be nice and consistent. I didn't need it to be quite as dynamic, especially since it's in the background of the mix, so I could afford to make make the compressor hit that vocal a bit more. And then I just did that for every single one of the tracks. I like to do that on the individual tracks, add some compression, because once it comes time to group the tracks, you can still add compression there, but it's you're kind of going for a different type of compression in a way, because when you add compression on a group channel or on a bus with multiple vocal tracks going through it, the compressor isn't really responding to one individual take, it's responding to the group, versus on the individual track, when you sing one word a bit louder, then it'll shoot that down and kind of get everything into more of a balanced state. And so that's why on every individual track, I like to put a compressor on. I don't even really worry much about EQ for this part. I do EQ mostly on the buses, on the background bus as well as the lead vocal bus. But on the individual tracks, just add a little bit of compression and you're good to go. And then one more thing that you want to make sure that you add to each individual track is a de-esser. So I just go ahead, grab a de-esser plugin, and on the lead vocal here,
Baby, what's your sign?
we're just shooting down those S's, those T's, and all of those sibilant type sounds. I added that to basically every vocal track here. Okay, so now what we want to do, let's move this to step 3, is we want to group the vocal tracks, and then we want to add an umbrella effect, like a saturation, a texture effect. Now, first off, let's talk about, okay, what does it mean to group a track, or what are buses? If you're not sure what buses are, then what I just recommend you do is do a quick Google search of just whatever your DAW is, buses, or like if you're in Logic, do Logic water buses, and just use very basic search results like that, and you're going to find exactly what you need to kind of get you up to speed. But I don't want to dive too much into the weeds on that in this video. But I'm going to assume now that you know what a bus is. So what I'm doing is I am sending these 2 lead vocal tracks, which it's basically just one lead vocal. It's just because this one kind of ran into this one here at this part. And so I just needed to make a new track. But these are both going to the lead vocals bus. That's what this lead box is here. And in white, this is the lead vocals bus. And then all of my lead vocals are running through there, which it's really only just one track. But I still like to use a bus for that. And then we have the background vocals. So then everything else, the double center, the double left, the double right, the +12, all of these are being sent to the background vocals bus, where I have some more processing that I will get into as well. So here is the lead vocal bus if I solo that.
With you, my sweet love, there's nothing
Let me turn off that delay for now.
Contemplating God.
And then here is the background vocals bus.
Right under the chemtrails, over the country club.
Right? So now, before we move on to the next step, which is step 4, one of the things I love doing is early on in the process, adding a plugin either on the bus level or even on the master channel, which affects every single track in your mix. You can add a plugin like RC20. I want you to listen to what happens when we add a plugin like RC20 to this mix. So these vocals are, of course, still dry because I turned off the reverbs and most of the effects for now, but you're going to still hear the impact that it has. So here is with everything on.
In the swimming pool, me and my sister just play.
And then listen to what happens when I turn on RC20 on the main output. So every single track in this mix is going to be affected as soon as I turn this on. Listen.
Playing it cool under the chemtrails, over the country club. Take out your turquoise and all of your jewels.
It immediately gives us that texture, right? I love RC20 so much, and I honestly don't know another plugin that sounds quite like this, or that really gives me that retro sound, that retro saturated effect, quite like RC20. So in this case, it might just be a thing of, look, maybe you just need to go get this plugin. I don't usually talk that much about individual plugins, or at least I usually don't preach like, go get this one, because there's so many out there and most of them are awesome. But this one truly stands on its own, in my opinion. I use it on every song. It's fantastic. But do you notice the effect it has? So immediately we are getting so much closer to the end result of what we want just by putting a plugin on, like RC20, on the master channel. Now, if you didn't want to do that in your specific song, you could also put an RC20-like plugin on the lead vocal and then on the background vocals bus as well if you didn't necessarily want it to affect all the instrument tracks as well. But in this case, I thought it sounded great just on the master channel. So now that we've added a bit of that analog, that retro texture to it, and we've worked on the individual tracks, we've grouped everything together, now it is time to focus on the lead vocal mix. So let's dive into that, which is step 4. So let's come in here to this lead vocal. I hit solo, and again, it sounds like this.
Country club.
And we, of course, already did the tuning, a bit of compression, and some de-essing on the individual track, and now everything else is going to happen on this lead vocals bus. So the first thing that I do on this bus is a bit of EQ using the fat channel here. I have the compressor turned off. I'm just using the EQ here, so let me actually isolate it. So I'm using this EQ that looks like this, just a vintage style EQ. And as you can see, there are really two main things I'm doing here. I'm just rolling off a bunch of high end. I'm really warming up the sound. Listen to what it sounds like when I turn off this EQ.
Contemplating God under the chemtrails over the country club, wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my...
So what we're doing there is because of these two cuts, about 3 dB cut at 7K, and then a 4 dB shelf cut here on this high frequency shelf, which, by the way, if you don't know what that looks like, it's just this. Let me turn this on for a second to show you. This is what a shelf cut looks like. So basically it's doing something like this, right? And that is what we're doing there with that EQ as the first step to getting this vocal mix in a good place. The reason I'm adding this EQ in this way and rolling off a bunch of those high frequencies is simply because that is what this song is asking for. It's a very intimate quality. It's very warm. You want to go after that warmth and that intimate quality. You don't need it to be super bright or cut through the mix like it's as if this is some dense mix with rocking out high treble-y guitars. Like, no, that isn't happening in this mix. You can be very, very mellow, very warm, and it adds a certain beauty to it when you do this, when you just remove some of those high frequencies specifically for this style of song. And so that's the first thing. That is the first step that I did here on this lead vocals chain, is some EQ. Now, the next thing I added is a bit of compression. Again, remember how I said I added compression on the individual lead vocal, which I did, right? We added this compressor here. But then what I'm doing is also adding this beautiful sounding plugin. This is the LA2A, or it is a model of the LA2A classic compressor. And this is from UAD. And it's just a super, super smooth compressor. It's barely activating during this part. I would imagine it mostly activates here.
Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my sister just playing.
It's really barely adding any compression at all. The majority of what it is actually adding is it adds a certain warmth and texture to it. But sometimes the needle does activate, but again, it's super, super subtle. So just a touch of compression. This vocal doesn't need to be compressed much. We just needed to add a little bit more and add some warmth to it as well with the nature of the way that plugin sounds. Now, the next thing I added is a little bit of saturation on this lead vocal. And I just went with this oxide tape. You can use any type of tape saturation or really any saturation that sounds good to you. And it sounds like this.
Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my sister just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
This is just another layer of warmth, another layer of little bit of texture to it. All of these things, or most of these plugins and effects are very subtle in isolation, but when you combine them, you're going to hear the difference. And then from there, it's just about touch up. It's like I added another EQ plugin, even though I did some EQ work earlier in the chain, just because I felt like we needed more of that upper mid-range boost, almost that nasal tone to actually pop through a bit more. So I'm going to turn this off. Here's where it was, and then I'll show you what it sounded like.
wearing our jewels in the swimming pool. Me and my sister,
Little bit of
just
that,
playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
Almost, this gives it a little touch of a telephone vocal type of effect. And that is what I wanted. Just a little bit of it, not extreme, but just a little bit by this boost around 1K and a boost close to 2K. So some extra EQ work there. And then I also added even more saturation. I used the Neve preamp here. This is just like just another saturation distortion plugin. Again, it's quite subtle. Here's without it.
The kids' swimming pools. Baby, what's your sign?
We'll get to that delay. I know that's popping through. Let me move here.
Country club, wearing our jewels in the swimming pool. Me and my sister.
Again, it's just another layer of a bit of saturation and texture. And then finally at the end, we are adding a slight amount of de-essing to kind of bring the vocal mix home. Even though I already have de-essing on the individual tracks, I often add a de-esser at the end of the chain as well, just to catch any other thing that may have popped through with all of the processing that came in between the two de-essers. Okay, so there we go. That is the lead vocal. Now let's move on to the reverbs and the delays that I added to really give this vocal that Lana Del Rey effect. Now, before I do that though, I do want to mention about, I know I've talked some about EQ. If you want more help with EQ, I have a really cool guide that you can download for free. It's the, what is it? A visual guide for fixing vocal EQ problems. That's the name of it. A visual guide for fixing vocal EQ problems. Link is in the description. This gives you just a really clear understanding of if you have a particular problem, like my vocal is too muddy or it's too bright or it's not bright enough, what do? This gives you visually what the cuts and boosts look like. It shows you what they look like. And it's just really helpful, especially if you feel a bit confused and slightly perhaps overwhelmed like I used to be when it comes to using EQ. So go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Okay, now what we want to do, let's move on to step 5, which is add reverb and delay. Now, the first thing when it comes to getting this Lana Del Rey reverb type of effect is I like to put my reverbs and my delays on return tracks. Now, just like I mentioned before, if you don't know what that is, then just go to Google, enter your DAW, if it's Logic or like me, Studio One, whatever it is, say Logic return tracks, what is it? And then just use that as a way of starting to understand what these things are. But basically, I am not putting the reverb directly on the track. Like I put the EQ directly on the track, right? I put the compressors directly on this lead vocals bus or the lead vocal track, if you will. But I don't like to do that with reverbs. Instead, I like to have a separate channel and then just send a copy of the vocal through that reverb. That way they are independent of each other. It just gives you more control when you do it that way. But all that aside, here is the crux of how you get a Lana Del Rey reverb effect. You want to add 2 reverbs. Number 1 is a long-ish reverb, and number 2 is just a short ambient room type reverb. So the first reverb I added, I just grabbed my default reverb plugin, which is Valhalla Vintage Verb. I started with the preset, which ended up being Fat Plate is the name of it, and then I made some slight adjustments from there. And this is what it sounds like when I turn on the send on this lead vocal running through that plate reverb. So here's what it sounds like without the reverb, right?
Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool. Me and my sister just playing it cool under the chemtrails.
So that's the first reverb we're adding here. It is just like a long-ish reverb. I would say between 2 and 4 seconds on the decay time is great. Maybe go for a plate, maybe a haw type reverb. Just browse through some presets. I could have gone with a haw or a plate. Those would probably be my first 2 choices for this type of sound. And I just found a preset I liked, made some adjustments from there, and I really like the way that this reverb sounds. Oh, and one more thing I will mention about this reverb too that's very important is the EQ. So you need to do a high cut and a low cut, but specifically a high cut, because if I don't have this high cut filter on this reverb turned on, here's what it sounds like.
Oops. Go to the market, the kids' swimming pools.
You don't need all those high frequencies. Instead,
Baby, what's your sign? My moon's in Leo, my Cancer.
It's like I put a blanket over that reverb sound, and it just gives you more of a vibe. It really does. And now, if your particular reverb plugin, of course, you don't have to use Valhalla Vintage Verb. I'm sure there's a reverb in your DAW that sounds just great. And if you're not able to add that type of filter EQ inside of the reverb plugin, if you are on a return track like I am, you can always add an EQ after the reverb as well and just do this. This is what we are doing inside of that reverb plugin, just rolling everything off down close to 2K. Okay, so that's the first reverb. The second reverb you want to add is a more up close ambient, like room reverb, and this is just a short sounding reverb. And let's turn off the plate for now so we can just dial in that short reverb. So here's what it sounds like.
Over the country club.
Kind of sounds like I'm in a bathroom, right? I just went with the ambience tiled room preset, which is here under the ambiences folder inside of this reverb plugin. I could have also gone with a room, just any type of short, makes it sound like you're kind of in a small space, in a bathroom, in a room, that type of thing. And it sounds really good, especially layered together with that longer, more hollowed out plate reverb that we added. And so if you add both of them together, then it sounds like this.
Where we got you.
Oh, let me turn this back down to 0.
In the swimming pool, me and my sister just playing it.
There's
cool
just the plate or the room,
over
and here's the long
country
plate.
Club.
Just those two together, it's like, oh, it's so nice because it adds that kind of sheenness with the short room reverb that helps it give it that texture right in your face, but then it's the long, more spacious plate reverb that adds that tail to it. And so those two together just work really, really well when you were going for a Lana Del Rey style vocal mix. Now, one more thing I did to wrap up the reverbs and the delays for this vocal mix is I did also send the lead vocal to a little bit of delay. It's very, very subtle, and I actually have the delay turned off in chorus 1, but then I turn it on for the verse and chorus 2. So it sounds like this, and then we'll talk about it.
The kids' swimming pools. Baby, what's your sign? My moon's in Leo, my Cancer is Sun.
So what we have here, just Valhalla delay, which is my go-to delay plugin. I just messed around with the milliseconds knob until I found, just a good echo time, and then the feedback, turn that up a bit. I've added the ducking as well. That way, every time my vocal is singing, that ducks the delay signal, which is just a really cool feature inside of Valhalla delay. And then after that, I actually added a plate reverb after the delay, because just like the reverbs, the delay is on a return track. So I added some reverb to just the delay signal itself, and that's why the delay sounds a little bit reverbic as well.
The kids' swimming pools.
Right?
Baby, what's your sign?
And then just like with the reverb too, I'm using the EQ high cut. So rolling off all the high end all the way down to like 1800. And if you want to know what that looks like on a regular EQ, it's literally doing this number. Or wait, this one. It is doing like this. All of this is getting rolled off on this delay, and you just have that mid-rangey sound, that very, very warm blanketed delay effect that's just barely sneaking through the mix. Now what I'm gonna do is turn off the backgrounds. That way we can just listen to the lead vocal and the rest of the mix, and here is what it sounds like with those effects we added.
There's nothing wrong, contemplating God under the chemtrails, over the country club.
Here's without those reverbs.
Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my sister just playing it cool under the chemtrails, over the.
So that's the lead vocal. Finally, let's wrap this up. Step number 6 is just mix the background vocals. And there's really not much to do here. I've already walked you through the individual tracks, or at least most of them. I might touch on this because I added some extra effects to this. But before I do that, we have the background vocals bus right here. And all of the background tracks, of course, are going through it. And it sounds like this.
Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my sister.
So the first plugin, just a little bit of de-esser.
Just playing it cool under the chemtrails over.
I don't know why it's not really doing anything, but anyway, I'll just leave that as it was. And then we have some EQ, rolling off a bunch of high end, and really basically rolling off almost everything except so I just messed around. I just wanted to warm up the sound. So here's without that EQ.
Wearing our jewels
Just
in the
warms it up.
swimming pool, me and my sister.
And again, these are the cuts, -5 at around 7K, -6 shelf cut, -6 down here like 360 in the low mids. So just doing a bunch of cuts there. And then I ran all these background vocals through a bit of tape saturation.
Just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
Just colors it up a little bit. And then finally some EQ to really just shape it, especially against the lead vocal. I wanted a bit more of a cut in this range, a bit of a boost to bring out some of that almost nasality tone that actually sounds cool for this song. And then I wanted to cut away some of the high end so that it doesn't run over the lead vocal. Most of this range here sounds better if the lead vocal more or less has most of those frequencies when it comes to the vocal.
Our jewels in the swimming pool,
without it.
me and my sister, just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
So you can hear it cleans it up a bit too, rolling off some of the low end on all of these background vocal tracks that are running through this bus. And then finally, this is the beauty of really dialing in the reverbs for your lead vocal, because guess what? Now we have those reverbs on return tracks ready to go for any other tracks we might want to send through it. And so I did. I just added the plate reverb, the same reverb that we sent the lead vocal to, the longer plate, and then all those background vocals as well as the short reverb.
Just playing it cool under the chemtrails.
Add that in with the lead vocal.
The country club.
And then well, let's come back here.
Under the chemtrails over the country club. Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my sister, just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club.
So, my friend, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to go ahead and play this song from start to finish, or at least my remake of it, so you get that satisfaction of hearing the final result. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure that you have access to my free vocal EQ guide. This is a visual guide for fixing vocal EQ problems. This gives you a set of the most common problems you and I run into when it comes to EQing our vocals, and I show you visually what you can do to address it and to fix it. And so it's 100% free. I'll leave a link in the description below. Be sure to check it out if you are like me, or like how I used to be, just kind of a bit baffled and confused as to how exactly I was supposed to use EQ. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's listen to this from start to finish. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
I'm on the run with you, my sweet love. There's nothing wrong. Contemplating God under the chemtrails over the country club. Wearing our jewels in the swimming pool, me and my sister, just playing it cool under the chemtrails over the country club. Take out your turquoise and all of your jewels. Go to the market, the kids' swimming pools. Baby, what's your sign? My moon's in Leo, my Cancer is sun. You won't play, you know far.